My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. Waiting for a long time.
That was President Trump this week announcing massive reciprocal tariffs. Trump's Liberation Day turned into a stock market meltdown, as we've told you, fueling fears of recession. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warning that Trump's tariff policy will likely lead to higher inflation and slower growth. So where does the economy really stand, and what are politicians on the Hill really saying? Enda Curran is a global economics reporter for Bloomberg and joins us once again. Good to see you. I was down at the White House on Thursday, and I was talking to some of the auto workers who were in that crowd. They were happy about this because they said, from their viewpoint, that their factories, have closed, have moved to Mexico, have moved to Canada, and they saw that as a way to maybe bring those jobs, bring those factories back. Are they right or wrong?
There are certainly parts of the economy, Tom, that have been crying out for protection, especially against competition from China that's subsidized by the government. So lots of small businesses say we need tariffs for protection, no question. But this is where there's a lot of debate over how do you go about protecting those industries and those businesses. What we have now is the biggest increase in tariffs in a century. We have economists saying that will send prices for everyday goods higher, and it will send growth lower. We in fact now have some big Wall Street banks saying the economy could fall into recession this year. So even if you take the point that something needs to be done to help heavy industry, well, in the very near term, at least, there's going to be significant economic disruption.
There was an interesting split this past week, because while Peter Navarro, the White House economic advisor on this, has been touting what these reciprocal tariffs would do, Elon Musk is in a very different place on all of this. He says that he had advised the White House to be create a zero tariff universe where none of this would exist. Why do we tariff each other?
Well, the point is that tariffs are meant to be a way of protecting your own local businesses, your own local industry. But over the last 20, 30 years, as we all know, generally speaking, governments have said, let's bring down these barriers, let's do more business together. But President Trump's point is the rest of the world hasn't moved as fast enough as the US. And that's why he's trying to settle this up.
So when we say reciprocal, and the president's way of describing was they do it to us, so we do it to them, is he in effect leveling a playing field here by imposing these tariffs on countries that are imposing tariffs here on the US?
Well, that's what the president is suggesting he's doing. But of course, the calculation that they've used to do that has been criticized as quite crude and isn't about leveling the playing field. It's more just based on the basic trade balance between both countries. But where the skeptics come into this is, even if you acknowledge there's a case for something to be done, is this the right way to go about it? Will this actually bring back industry? That's the question.
Clearly, Wall Street doesn't like it. You talk to folks individually. A lot of people on Main Street are uneasy about this because they're concerned that it could spark a recession. And what we've seen in New York in the last couple of days on the street has been troubling to a lot of folks. They've seen their own personal portfolios take big hits, tens of thousands of dollars in some cases, maybe more, depending on how much your investments are. The long game here keeps suggesting that eventually this will even out, but the result of this could be another recession. What has been the political reaction to this in Washington amongst Republicans, who a lot of them, Ted Cruz included, will say he's not a fan of this?
Yeah, so there's some reporting, some inklings of discomfort coming out from the Republican side of the in Congress, Tom. You have, in particular, Ted Cruz coming out vocally making the point, hang on, if we go down this road of tariffs and keep them in place, that will both hit the economy and, of course, hurt their electoral prospects. But that said, though, it doesn't feel like we've reached a tipping point whereby Congress or Republicans are at a point where they want to seize back control of tariff policy from the president. That doesn't seem to be the case. The president remains in control. It seems like we're now in the phase of negotiations from here on. The president might cut some deals with other countries. Depending on how those deals work out will dictate how long the tariffs are in place.
Almost from the beginning of his entry into the political world, the president has pointed at China as the United States' greatest economic threat and imbalance when it comes to trade. But how does the EU, who generally are our closest allies on the planet right now, viewing this? What is the European viewpoint of this. I know the UK is included in this as well, but let's just start with the European Union right now. What are they looking at when they see us?
So the European Union came to Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago, the Trade Commissioner, and made it clear they were willing to talk about a deal, willing to bring down tariffs on autos, for example, willing to buy more LNG from the US, and willing to take some other steps to try and head off some kind of a trade war. They again had talks during the week, Trade Commissioner and the US administration. The tone was more harsher. I think now they're at a point where the EU will be looking at ways to retaliate. But within that, there are mixed signals. You get like President Macron of France saying, stop investing in the US, telling French companies. But you have other soundings coming from, say, Italy and the like, saying, let's not retaliate against the US, let's negotiate this. So to be clear, the EU have said they're willing to talk business, but they're also willing to retaliate.
There's also been tough from Canada and its new prime minister as well, too. How much of this is tough talk? How much of it is actual economic policy that they are going to enact as a retaliation against the U.S.?
I think we're at a point now where most trading partners caught up in this will have to retaliate, at least in some way. You know, the opening point may be, can we do a deal, can we negotiate? But how long will that window last, Tom? That's the question. And at which point they will have to respond, both for their own constituency and their own industry. Canada's in that bucket, for example. We are seeing governments respond. How to do that without causing pain for their economy is the key thing.
And we enter into this conversation, you know, on these broad tariffs at a moment where we're not quite out of the woods on inflation here domestically as well, too. Is there danger in this for the White House?
Of course there's economic danger. It's a huge risk. You have the Federal Reserve downgrading their own forecast recently, the OECD downgrading the forecast for US, big Wall Street banks downgrading their growth forecast for the US and warning of inflation. There's a lot at stake here and a lot to pull off to try and get right in one go.
Well, certainly we're going to continue to track this as it goes along. Enda Curran is a Bloomberg global economic reporter, and I imagine you've had your hands quite full over the last couple of days.
Busy time, for sure.
Busy time for the news business on all hands on deck right now. And a reminder, Benjamin Netanyahu will be in Washington, actually, not only to talk about Gaza, but also to talk about the situation with the tariffs as well, too. Enda, we appreciate your time. We thank you for coming in.